When I started, I was nobody. And then I thought I was somebody. And then I recognized I was nobody. And then I realized what I'd like to tell you now. I think the most significant aspect of this project is for generations down the road to have some understanding of their great, 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 great grandfather, all of my children who will be part of this, and all of my grandchildren who will be part of this. Someone can get a feel for who we are and what we stood for and whether or not there was a purpose that came forward after living a full life. Certainly that purpose is clear for me, and I'm hoping that it comes through this film.
Action.
I am the one walking beside me whom I do not see. I am the one whom at times I manage to visit and at times I forget. I am the one who remains silent when I talk. I am the one who forgives, sweet when I hate. I am the one who takes a walk where I am not. And I am the one who will remain standing when I die. So, so you should know, this is one of the main projects. There's a second-year project at the University of Santa Monica. History of Loving is we based the whole thing on Erickson's ages. But anyway, I wanted you to see it for the first time. And this will be in the family. Good-looking guy, even at a young age, as you can see.
That's wild. It doesn't look like you. This looks more like you.
Yeah, well, we started in business in 1924. My mother borrowed $2,500 from all of her relatives, and they bought one storefront on Plain Street in Newark, and they started to be in the used furniture business. And that's how really Brenner Desk started. He was quite successful with the business, and over a period of time, he actually bought every storefront on Plain Street. Yeah, my parents were very young when they came over here, 1900. My dad was from Germany, my mother was from Russia. They were both born in Europe, and they came over here as children. My parents were absent most of the time, but they were still loving and they were good people. And my father was 42 and my mother was 39 when I was born. Unfortunately, all of my grandparents had died before I was born, so I have no real knowledge of their ancestry. They settled in Paterson, New Jersey, and unfortunately, both my mother and my father's parents passed away when they were 13 years old. So at very young ages, they both were responsible for taking on whatever had to be handled for the family. When I asked my parents about them, they really had very little to say because of that, as well as the fact that there was such persecution going on in Russia and Germany towards the Jews.
Yeah.
So this is my father's mother and father's father. This
And
is
so this is the one that came through Ellis Island?
I think it's neat that they are Jewish and they fled Poland pre Holocaust and World War II and came through Ellis Island. And I think that whole history is pretty neat.
both of your great grandparents came through Ellis Island and then went to Patterson and worked at the silk mills, and then passed on. I think it was either tuberculosis, I think was what took them, and then at 13 they both had to go to work. My father's parents, Pincus and Fanny Brenner, had 4 children: Joseph, Fred, Celia, and Rose. My mother's parents, Samuel and Esther Silk, had 7 children, all girls: Anna, Fanny, Ruth, Celia, Martha, Estelle, and Charlotte. In doing research, I found that in both of the areas that my grandparents and my parents were born, the Jews were isolated. They were actually put into separate areas to live. There was a great deal of anti-Semitism that went on. My grandparents grew up with a great deal of fear, and their lives were not ones of a great deal of freedom. 4 of the aunts and uncles had died before I had never even met them, and they never talked about them. Nobody talked about anything. There was something going on. I think that my father's father committed suicide. For whatever reason, they chose not to talk about their parents or what went on when they were youngsters. It gave me an understanding of the depressions that they went through, the isolations that they went through, the difficulties of just trying to be a normal human being. And they brought that energetic to me in a lot of ways. A lot of my life I suffered with depression, and I found that it was difficult to deal with who I was, where I came from. I questioned often, what is it all about? Why am I here? Ever since I was a little boy, I can remember that was the kind of search that was inside of me that brought me on the journey ultimately to where I am still finding out who I am. They got through 8th grade, and at that point, my father started to work as a gopher. He would go to the stores and bring back coffee or whatever it was that the furniture dealer actually that he was working for needed. That's how he got indoctrinated into the furniture business. He worked for a company called Max Blau, which was the oldest office furniture company at that time in New Jersey. My father was an extremely savvy marketeer, and although he had no education, he was an excellent communicator. He had the ability of understanding what somebody's needs were and could really communicate with them.
Was he a good salesman?
He was an excellent salesman. I told you that he had made a deal with the Cuban government and took 200 desks on a cargo plane to Cuba. I think one of the biggest turning points in business was when my father made a relationship with the president of Cuba at that time and sold them 200 used desks. This was his Italian woodworker, and he would buy up every roll-top desk he could find, and he would refinish them, and it would be very beautifully done. And so he created, in a sense, from a used furniture, start. He developed something that was more of a design orientation. In 1959, my father signed an exclusive dealership with Herman Miller, which was the premier manufacturer in the world. So at that point, we hired a designer, and that was really the beginning of the company transitioning slightly from a full merchandising type of a company to one that had a decorative design capacity. Well, as I mentioned, my father was a brilliant marketeer, and he came up with the idea of designing the Brenner desk. The Brenner desk consisted of a special desk that would have its own dictaphone, its own radio. He had a safe in the back. He had a little refrigerator in the back. It was quite a desk. It was the $5,000 Brenner desk. This is the desk. This is the desk that your grandfather designed with a group of other people throughout the country, and this was on the Milton Berle show. And then this is your grandfather. This is what I wrote about my father. It told a lot about what I was going through.
What attributes do you think that your father possessed that you possess today?
He was very clearly a man motivated by how successful you would be. And it was first place or no place was his motto. So it was being vigilant and persistent, and he would always tell me, look for the positive in a person. You find the beauty in them and ask them who they were. You find out about that person and they'll open up to you, and you'll find a means of being able to connect with them that could be very lasting. He would comment and compliment me on the fact that I picked that up as a very, very strong trait very early on, and it carried through.
I'm a very business-minded individual, and I think I get that from multiple people within my family and learning their backgrounds. And I think my grandfather is a big key to that. I hope to one day be like that.
I feel that there's a lineage characteristic that was passed down to both my brother and myself. Both of us grew up with parents that had significant fear because they went through the depressions, and there was a great deal of anxiety about save for a rainy day, put your money into the bank, don't spend it. They were pretty funny. Obviously, I went the other direction. Joseph Brenner was clearly the closest person to me. I think he recognized my yearning to find myself. He was much more present than my mother. My mother unfortunately suffered from severe depression. In those days, there was no therapist or medically a way to treat her. It was a fairly dysfunctional family, I would say. My father and mother often had arguments. There wasn't a whole lot of loving going on. I don't really ever remember my mother and father holding each other. They were good people, but they certainly had their issues. My dad would travel a great deal, and whenever he came back from a trip, he always would bring me a ceramic dog. He knew I loved dogs, and I had 30 different kinds of dogs that he in my collection, I remember.
He had these little porcelain dogs. Whenever I would sleep over, I would be with my grandma, and we would sleep in my dad's room, and I would look at all the collection of all of his dogs, and I loved it. I loved it. I felt like I was close to my dad then, who I didn't really know.
Yeah, I don't know whether you knew that your grandfather and your father went to school at the same time. At Upsall, we took courses. Your grandfather always wanted to be educated. He was self-educated. He read over 1,000 books, and he really wanted to be a doctor. This is your dad. This is this is very much like you two. Golden curly hair. Because my mother really wanted a girl, I was a very pretty boy. I had long blonde curly hair. They cut my curls and kept them in a box. When I was later on in life, I found my curls that they had saved. This was Phil. This is the person who raised me the first 3 years, Phil Posen.
Your mom
She gave me
fired Phil
at 3 years old because she wanted to baptize me. I wasn't really wanted to come into this world. My mother had Edward, who was 14 years my elder, and then lost 2 children in between, and she had it. She didn't want another child. They needed to go back to work. They didn't expect to have me, and there was no time really to pay attention to me, so they gave me to a helper, Philomena Phil Posen. Phil is probably the reason why I have the capabilities of loving that I do today, because I was unconditionally loved by Phil Posen. There was such a love for me that she wanted to get me baptized. Right. She was Catholic, and she was just totally loving me, and she wanted to do that, and that was a little too much for my mother to handle. My mother was furious. Being immigrants and Jewish, she immediately fired Phil, took over the responsibility of raising me. It was really traumatic for me because I had a wonderful bond with a loving, wonderful, giving person who adored me. My whole life changed. Ironically, I became baptized later on in life with MSIA. This is again another stage in my life.
That's it. Now, here comes Bobby.
Glamour shots.
Yeah.
Because I was left alone so often, I guess I was angry and very unhappy because there was nobody to talk to. I had so many questions, no one to talk to. So I acted out quite a bit.
He had a film room, a dark room, I think it's called, or black dark room. He got a hold of a negative of a naked woman, and he was in his basement developing these photos and then selling them to his friends. But all right, now let's spin the story. Yeah, here. Yeah, I feel like we're in China with the censorship.
My parents were never home. I wanted to be creative, and they gave me the opportunity to have my own dark room down the basement. I would pass a photography store, and this fellow liked me, and I would always ask questions about enlargers and different things. I was very curious about photography. And he said, here, this is a glass negative it was a naked woman who was very beautiful. And he said, you can play with this and enlarge it and change the focus and whatnot. I played with this enlargement, and I made a really, really nice photograph of this gal, and I was pretty proud of it.
Yeah.
Hey, you're 13, you did something creative.
And so
I was also a school crossing guard. And I had a friend of mine who used to cross there, and I wanted to show it to him. I wasn't selling it.
Okay.
And I guess he went home and told his father that I did that. And his father called my father, Joseph Brenner, and he was also in the synagogue, this guy, which was very embarrassing.
Of course.
To have his son doing something so horrible as
Right.
showing another 13-year-old a picture of a woman. It was horrible.
Right.
And so I got 15 straps of a belt
Oh.
that night. I'll never forget. And that started me wondering about whether my parents were a little bit dysfunctional. I was not afraid to get into a fight with somebody. I was a pretty strong guy. And yeah, I got into a lot of different physical fights. Michael's my oldest friend, best friend in the world. We go back 60 years, more than that, 65 years.
I met Bob Brenner when I was, I believe, 16 years old. Bob is about a year older than I. You were born in 41, right?
40. Is
40. Well, then that's almost 2 years.
that right?
Yeah.
I always thought you were older than I was.
I don't know why.
But again, it was one of these things where we're instantaneously connected. All these years, you have never, ever stopped being a brother to me. And in a lot of ways, an older brother, the way you used to look after me. If ever I had any need, you were there, and you every day. He's a very interesting guy. He's the biggest producer of blue-green algae, E3 Live. Business guy, entrepreneur. Michael is one of the most sensitive, loving, compassionate, also extremely creative, amazing artist and sculptor ever since we were kids. Wild experiences together growing up. But we palled around all the time. We were best friends from the beginning. I was thinking about the different things that we did together. Much of them we won't talk about, right?
Appreciate that.
Yeah, right. Okay. But I remember one time I just got my car. Do you remember
That Fairlane hardtop convertible, I think 57, was it?
Yeah, 57.
Thank God it got us through an incident that we both could have been dead.
You remember that day we cut school?
Terrible rainstorm, yep.
It was torrential rain. We cut school. We're taking a ride. We're on Route 1, and all of a sudden the car went into a skid. It jumps over the divider on Route 1, comes back again over the divider, and we came to a stop on the side of the road. How we lived through that, we both sat there for, I think, maybe 5 minutes. Neither one of us said a word. If I got ill, Mickey Saber would call me every single day while I was ill to make sure I was okay. And what could he do to help? He's a loving, giving, beautiful friend.
So I'm sure he told you about getting pissed off at his teacher and going back and breaking all the windows in the school.
I was going to be singing June is Busting Out All Over. Got thrown out of that because I wouldn't stop talking. And I was then told I would not be in the graduation song. And of course I was embarrassed and shame. My parents were coming, my aunts and uncles were coming to my graduation. But as I told you before, I retaliated.
So that evening, he went back and broke the majority of the windows in his school.
In her office, and then
just to make sure the teacher knew that it was directed at her.
Put a cherry bomb in her milk box.
Put an explosive device in her mailbox.
Had my first police reports. That was Bad Boy Bobby. That was the one I would say that I was closest to my son Sam.
And my understanding is after he got expelled,
They decided to send me to Bordentown Military School.
it's hard for me to envision a young Uncle Bob in military academy, but
I'm sure you can relate to this
Yes,
photo.
military school, absolutely.
Military school, you both wore those similar uniforms. Unfortunately, they put me with the postgraduates rather than in a regular dorm, and these guys already had their cars. They'd bring girls into the dorm, you know, they'd have parties, there'd be drinking. I mean, this was not what my folks, I'm sure, had bargained for. I was lonely. I wasn't happy. So I would hitchhike from Bordentown, New Jersey, back to Newark, New Jersey. One evening, I went to a dance, and there was a beautiful young girl there named Suzanne Dubois. I was crazy about her, and vice versa. And long and the short is that every time I would hitchhike home, and the two of us would get together every day and be together. Both of us as kids, she was 15 and a half, I was now 17, decided that we never wanted anybody to take us away from each other. And we decided to get married. So we ran away with a buddy of mine and another friend of his, and we went to Elkton, Maryland, and we were married. At that time, they didn't ask for age, anything. So at 15 and a half and me 17, almost 18, we were married. We kept it secret. 3 months later, Suzanne was pregnant with my first child, Wendy. Both our parents were adamant about not having the baby. They wanted us to have a abortion, and we were just as adamant it wasn't going to happen. They said, okay, you made your bed, you're going to sleep in it. And they told me, you go out and figure out how you're going to make some money, because you're going to have to pay for your new wife and your baby. So I got a job as a salesman, we really call it. I was a salesman for Americana Photos. In those days, they would hire young guys, and they would drop us off in suburban areas, and we would go door to door, talk to the young mothers about having their family photographs taken. I found that I was quite adequate at communicating at that age, and I became their top salesman. I did that for a year, and then my father said, look, you know, if you're that good at selling, you should be working with us. My mother was still working there, my father and my brother. They wanted me to learn every aspect of the business. They wanted me not just to be a salesman, but to understand how the furniture was delivered and how it was refinished. It was interesting to me to learn the different aspects of the business. It ultimately served me well down the road, because I moved into straight sales, and I was really able to talk to people about how we handled things differently. After I got done in the afternoon handling furniture sales, I would then go to the bowling alleys, because I was a good bowler.
Robert was on a bowling league, and he is a very good bowler. but he had to be away. They needed someone to sub for him. And because he was such a good bowler, they needed someone talented. And someone knew of my husband who had been bowling since he was well before high school, college, and then he also bowled for the United States Army while he was stationed in Frankfurt, Germany. But Bobby did not know him. So he ended up coming back in time to go to the game. So he got to watch Tom bowl and he got to root for him. And he just really loved his style and his skill and his ability. And so afterward, he went up, introduced himself, and thanked him for taking his place and doing such a great job. And they ended up going out to get to know each other better. And that was the beginning of their relationship.
Tom Colello, another brother of mine, a man of few words, a man of great wisdom, a man of great loving for me and vice versa.
They exuded a love for one another that was blatantly obvious. And that is how I met my husband. And it's also how I met my future brother-in-law.
He liked me. I was kind of a risk taker. He was a choir boy. It was kind of the perfect combination. We would go to the track together, and we loved the horses. We loved watching them. And
so Uncle Bobby and my dad were like always really close. They were into the horse racing. My father was like big on the handicapping, and like when he was handicapping, he was like heads down. I wanted like an ice cream or something like that, and my dad's like, "No, I'm studying." Da 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 da. And Uncle Bobby's like, "Tom, come on, it's your son, right? He wants an ice cream. Come on, Steven, let's go get some ice cream." And that was my Uncle Bobby, right? I mean, he realizes like the experience of having us together is more important than a single race that you're going to win or lose or never remember.
One time we went to the track and we overheard this fella at the next table talking about how he handled certain training things and whatnot. And I turned around and I wanted to find out who he was. And he was a trainer. And I said, I would love to get into the racing business. He said, no problem. He said, all you have to do is buy a horse out of a claiming race. I wound up having over 15 thoroughbreds over a period of time. It was very exciting. These were some of the race horses, different horses. We had a horse named Big Rock Candy. He never won the $250,000 races, but he would come in second or third, and it was probably the most exciting horse that you could ever have, because he would be 30 lengths behind coming into the stretch, the final stretch, literally.
He was what they called a closer. So that meant he would just sort of take his time getting around the track, no big hurry. And then when everybody else was all tired out, he would just get around that last curve and clean house to the finish line.
Even to this day, I remember how excited we would get, because this horse had a bigger heart than any horse I've ever met.
Very Practical, who continues to make up good ground. Camera and Qualificata by the 16th pole. Very Practical 2.5 lengths behind, but gaining its Camera and Qualificata. Here comes Very Practical charging on the outside. Very Practical.
Again, I was indoctrinating Tom into the gambling world. One day I got an invitation to go on a gambling junket. I asked Tom, would he like to come? And he said, I don't have any money to gamble.
It was like $5,000 a couple. And my dad's like, I can't afford that. He's like, Tom, look, it's $5,000 a couple. I want you to come with me. You're my best friend. Can you bring like $500 to gamble? Oh, yeah, sure. That's okay, good.
And we were off and running.
Bogota, Colombia, let your imagination go.
The first night, I went to the table, and sure enough, I won $1,500 like in an hour. We went to the cashier, and I remember the cashier said to me, I can't cash these chips. I said, well, I don't understand. What do you mean you can't cash the chips? They said, well, you can't cash out until the end of the trip. That is not the way it works.
No, we don't give money until the end. And Uncle B was like, this is a freaking scam. So went to my dad and then went to Anthony, who could play a leading role in The Sopranos. They went to everybody and said, don't bet another thing here.
Take your chips, go into town, go to the best restaurants, buy your wife some clothes, do whatever you want, but use the chips because this casino is not paying you. 4 days later, it's time to leave. We all go to the airport and we're sitting, waiting for the plane. It was a prop plane and it was sitting on the runway. But as we walk into the sitting area, there's two military guys in military uniform with machine guns. And then I look over at the plane and there are 4 other guards with machine guns, 2 on each side. This fella came over and explained to us that nobody's leaving until all this money is paid. Well, the originator of the trip was there, and what they finally decided is that unless somebody was responsible for the money, plane's not going anywhere. Everybody got on the plane except for Anthony, Tom, myself, and this fella who put together the junket, who was part of the scheme. He's responsible. And they said he's going to stay here until he comes up with the money. I knew in those days, this was Bogota, Colombia, and in Bogota, you would find people lying in the gutters. So I went to Anthony and Tom and I said, I got an idea. We can't let this guy stay here. We've got to get him out. I said, give me all your singles, 5s, 10s. We had a roll of bills. And I said, here's what we're going to do. We have this dice. I'm going to start shooting dice out on the runway. And I'm going to let the money fly. The props were going, so the air was blowing. And I said, I think these guys are going to start chasing it. And once they do, have the pilot ready to go. I started rolling the dice, and the money's going all over the place. All of a sudden, one of these guards starts chasing the money. Next one chases. Before you know it, all 4 are all over the runway. We started to run like faster than I could ever remember. Everybody got on the plane. The plane was moving, and the stairs were still down while the plane was going down the runway. We got on the plane. We got back home. Anthony had this guy give us back our money, and it was on the front page of the New York Post. It was quite an experience. Selling off the floor, selling desk chairs, it wasn't really serving me. I saw a bigger picture. I wanted to make more money. I came up with the idea that why not create our own architectural design firm? I had approached my brother with the idea, and he thought I was crazy. He was not interested in hiring architects and designers, but I knew that I could find the right people. People was my thing. My brother was adamant that this was not going to happen. He fought me every inch of the way, and finally I got to the point where I surrendered. And I decided that I was going to leave the business, go out to Oklahoma and start an oil company. I went out there, I found the geologist. Geologist found me a great engineer. I wanted to find the land myself. I figured that I could talk to a landowner and talk them into allowing us to drill, offset one of their wells and give them additional royalty than what others were offering. And Sure enough, we hit oil the first time out of the gate. I had a great time. I would fly out all my friends, and we'd have my cowboy boots and my hat, and we were traveling all over Oklahoma, and went really well until one day I got a phone call from my brother, and he said, Robert, we're selling the business. He said, I met with somebody. I told him about your concept, about what you want to do, and he likes it very much. He's a billionaire, and he's in Rockefeller Center. Do yourself a favor, go talk to him. I really loved my brother, and this had caused a real rift between us, me leaving the business, and he was getting older. My brother's 14 years older than I am. It was an opportunity to get paid handsomely for the business. I could then start to recruit architects, designers, space planners. I needed the backing, I needed the money to hire these people and build a consulting business, which is really what spearheaded the business and pyramided us from $1 million business to a $40 million business with over $3 million worth of design and architectural fees.
What Bob was trying to accomplish, and I give him tremendous credit for this, was he was incorporating architectural services into his sales pitch. So I spent a lot of time, I won't say on the street, but out of the house, out and about. And Bob grew up in Newark. Now, he was a Jewish kid from Newark, but as far as I can tell, he hung out with all the Italians. They were bookmakers, they were gamblers. Newark at the time was not what Newark is today. It was a fairly sophisticated city. We did some business together, but more importantly, we became close friends. And as I've remained close friends with Steve Siegel.
Well, Steve Siegel, phenomenal guy.
When I was at Cushman & Wakefield and based in New Jersey, he would be my go-to guy for recommendations to clients for furniture. He was, I guess, one of the premier furniture dealers in the state.
We had a luncheon together in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, and from that moment on, we became best friends.
As it turned out, at that lunch, Bob and I literally fell in love with each other.
Being in business and having the desire to really get to know somebody and spot people that had exceptional qualities, it really didn't mean anything to me whether somebody was a janitor or the CEO of a company. I was interested in who they were. I found that one person that came into the office at one point was a fellow by the name of Pat, and he was the number one handicapper with Jimmy the Greek, who was on television. One of the most significant experiences I had was with a bookmaker named Red. The arrangement was as soon as either one of us were up or down, at that point $10,000, we would settle up. And the next week we were up $10,000 on Wednesday. I called Red on the phone and I asked him where he would like to meet me to pay the money, and he said, let's just wait for the weekend. I explained, Red, that's not the arrangement we have. And I made it clear to him I wanted the money and I wanted it today. It was Wednesday. He hung up the phone, called him back. He told me to get lost. He wasn't going to pay me. I could wait to the end of the week or get nothing. I made a call to another friend of mine. He didn't like what was going on either. And he said, look, I'll tell you what you do. You call this number, tell him you're a friend of mine, and he's going to help you out. I had no idea who I was calling. made the phone call, speak to this fella. He knew what the situation was, and I remember him saying to me, Bob, I heard about this. You call that bookmaker back and you just say the following things. Say, Tumac, Friday night, Seton Hall, 7 o'clock. He said, don't say anything more. So I called back Red. I said, Tumac, Friday, 7 o'clock, Seton Hall, be there. Hung up the phone. Friday comes along. I got there a little early. I meet this guy. He's a tough guy. You know he's connected somewhere. Anyway, Red showed up. He talks to Red. He says, did Bob pay you last week? He said, yeah. He said, you owe him $10,000 this week? He said, yeah. He said, why aren't you paying him? Red says, I don't got it. He said, what do you mean you don't got it? He said, I don't have anything. Tumac looks over at him and he says, do you own anything? Do you have anything? He said, the only thing I have is a Chicken Delight. Chicken Delight was a restaurant on Chancellor Avenue, a successful little restaurant. At that point, Tumac put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Bob, you and I own a Chicken Delight. I don't know where it came from. Thank God. At that moment, I turned around and I said, Anthony, it's all yours. He looked at me and he said, Bob, if I didn't like you, I'd consider that an insult. Anthony Tumac Acereta was the head of the New Jersey Mafia, which I had no idea. This was a guy who was feared by everyone. Had I made the wrong choice at that moment, my entire life could have gone a different direction. Anthony used to pick me up with his limo and take me to Trader Vic's in New York. I felt like I was a big shot. I got a call and it was my wife and she said, Robert, I don't have some good news for you. The FBI just left here and you better report immediately to the federal building. There's a warrant out for your arrest, United States of America against Robert S. Brenner. That was the first time that I actually was scared. I was really scared. I wound up hiring a top criminal attorney, and the FBI found that I was really just a gambler. It looked like I was part of this syndicate, which clearly I wasn't. And that was my experience with gambling. Took me quite a while before I started betting on games again.
Orb finds joy in Mudville.
Okay. Now, let me tell you the story behind that. It was a Kentucky Derby time, and I wanted to bet on the Kentucky Derby, and I called Robert Donnelly.
I've never been afraid to take risks. And Bob is a similar kind of guy. I mean, we both like to gamble. I mean, we're not degenerate gamblers. We're not betting crazy amounts of money, but we like the action.
There was a horse by the name of Orb who happened to be the favorite. And then there was another horse by the name of Golden Soul. And since I had been working on a spiritual development within myself, I thought that was a great horse to possibly put a few bucks on. So I bet $20 on the favorite, Orb, and Golden Soul. So I called Donnelly and asked him if he would put it in for me, which he did. I watched the race. Orb wins, and Golden Soul comes in second. I was like flipping out because it was like $98.81, and I had $20 on it. I'd won $980, and I called Donnelly on the phone, and I'm all excited, and I said, Robert, paid $98. I won almost $1,000. He said, Bob, he said, it wasn't $98. It was $9,081. You won $10,000. Because I trusted in soul, in a golden soul, and for whatever reason, this is like an impossible situation. And I never forget that day.
Bob's like, no, I know Joe Pesci. In fact, he directed, he produced a movie with Joe Pesci, maybe one of his first.
How about Ralph DeVito, our friend that was a filmmaker?
We made this film, Death Collector. It wasn't really very successful. It was sold to a European group. They changed the name to Family Enforcer. Death Collector was a film about the mob. The key character in the film was a fella that, if you owed money to the bookmaker or the loan shark and you didn't pay, he would go collect the money and take care of whatever way was necessary for you to get the money. That guy's name was Joe Pesci.
Big time. What is it? Hey, Joe Ubats. I was watching you gamble over there. You don't stick it in like you used to, pal.
Yeah. I lost a few dollars.
Yeah, you lost more than a few. I was watching.
How's your shortstop friend Butchie doing?
Come on, relax, Butchie. Calm down.
What about you? You coming with me? Yeah, I'm coming with you, mother.
You didn't hear about Butchie, huh? I don't think we'll be seeing him anymore.
Frank Vincent was in the film, and he was one of the stars of The Sopranos.
Joe Pesci, I had lunch with him. This was before he had any fame at all. He was just starting.
He was working at a diner. After seeing Pesci and Vincent in Death Collector, Martin Scorsese cast both of them in Raging Bull. Pesci was nominated for supporting actor in the Academy Awards.
Joey, come on, shut up. Shut up. Mind your fucking business and shut up. You're taking this all wrong, Joey. I said shut up. Okay, what's the matter with you? There's nothing going on here. This is innocent. We're only having a few drinks.
That was the end of it. Until about a year or two later, Ralph called me and he said, let's do another film. I wrote a script called Anna. This was the film that we shot with Lillian Roth. This is the script, Anna, that we did with Ralph DeVito. Michael Saber and I were partners, and we produced this with Ralph. We did this in 1977. Mickey and I produced it. The thing with Ralph DeVito was an interesting thing because you and I put up the money for Anna. It was called Anna.
Was the film.
And
it was going to be a good film too.
And he said it's a really beautiful film about getting old and how it affects you to get older, how you see yourself. And it was a very emotional film with a great deal of depth. I loved it. The star of the film was a well-known actress by the name of Lillian Roth. Yeah, well, Lillian Roth, so she was the lead. She wasn't a Helen Hayes, but she was on the next level, very well known, very well respected. She was great. Susan Hayward played Lillian in her autobiography, I'll Cry Tomorrow. We had Joe Pesci starring, and Frank Vincent from The Sopranos, and Lillian Roth. And you and I put up $250,000, $125,000 each. And the deal was Ralph was guaranteed to us he was going to do the whole shoot in 6 weeks in Staten Island. After 3 weeks, only a third of the film was done. And I told Ralph, I said, we're done. We said, Ralph, you gave us your word. And Ralph said, no, you got to have takes. You got to do this over, blah, blah, blah. And you and I said, that's it. No more money, period. Cut it, edit, You raise and then we'll raise the rest of the money. You try to raise it, and we'll continue. So while Ralph was editing the film, unfortunately, Lillian Roth died. As our title character, we couldn't complete the film without Lillian. Essentially, had lost $250,000. We lost all the money. You and I thought, that's it. We took a gamble. We lost. And then a year later, I got a letter in the mail from AGFA. I opened it up, and there was a check for $250,000. There was the check for the entire amount we put in, because I had no clue. I didn't do anything. I didn't know that the leading lady is automatically insured for the full cost of the film.
Wow.
So we got all our money back. We were compensated in another one where we dodged the bullet.
My dad, for many years, had done trips with work people down the Colorado River, whitewater rafting.
Bob had gone down to Colorado with Steve Siegel.
I said, Bob, I want to put a few guys together. Do you want to go?
We put together a group of, I think maybe 14 or 16 guys. And we rented our own raft. We all flew out and spent 4 or 5 days on the river.
And it was just spectacular. We went down that river, and no, I didn't swim. Yes, I don't know how to swim a lick. I still can't. It's no longer embarrassing because all my kids know, my grandkids sort of know. But I would stand up as we hit a rapid, and I'd scream, this river's not conquering me, we're conquering it.
If you've never been on the Colorado through the Grand Canyon, it's a magical experience.
We would pitch our campsite on the beaches at night, as clear as you can imagine. Take yourself to a planetarium and multiply that beauty by 10. And that's what the river was like. The moon would rise over the canyon walls and light up the sky with just about every star you could imagine. It was just breathtaking.
It was a great experience because you have really no cell service. There's no distractions. It's just the three of us on the water. You know, obviously incredible scenery, and just plenty of time to, you know, shoot the breeze and talk and, you know, take in like really beautiful natural surroundings.
We laughed all the time. And being able to laugh together was one of the strengths of Bob and my relationship. We laughed about everything. We laughed at each other.
My favorite part of the river trip was
teeing you up for this one, for the end.
The end was the end, because at the end of going down the Colorado River, it's in the Grand Canyon. And what's at the end of the Grand Canyon? Vegas. So we take a helicopter out of the Grand Canyon, straight into Vegas, right to the casinos.
This was a vision I had that I wrote in 1992, that I really live in peace in my heart, that I no longer feel alone and scared, because it was underneath, I lived through a lot of depression. So it's been an ongoing process of loving oneself and knowing that what the most meaningful things in life are to be in service, to make a difference. And the highest level of consciousness being service. A fellow used to come in by the name of Lou Kennedy into the office, and he would always want to see me. No matter what I was doing, he would say, you just tell Bob Brenner to come out. He was a tough, rough guy. He would say, you know, you're a good guy. You know, you got to come to the country. You got to come to the country. And I said, well, I never lived in the country. He said, well, if you ever want to come, you call me. This is something else new that I can do in my life. I've never been in the country. What's the difference? If I don't like it, I don't have to stay there. So I called Lou Kennedy on the phone, and he said, let me get the top real estate broker, this Virginia Turpin. The first house he took me to, he drove up this long driveway, and it was a beautiful, gorgeous piece of property. And I saw the size of the property. It was 17 acres. And I was thinking to myself, this is really ridiculous. It's a waste of time. There's no possible way in Mendham, New Jersey, that I could afford anything like this. Mendham is where the United States equestrian team was. Jacqueline Onassis Kennedy had her home there. This was way out of my league. But anyway, this elderly fella who owned the home, his wife had passed away and he wanted to move to Florida. He was really a great guy, and I started to talk to him, and he said, "Come on, let me show you around." I said, "Well, I don't want to waste your time." He said, No, let me show you the property. It was exquisite property. We're driving back out the driveway, and Lou Kennedy said, "What'd you think?" I said, "Well, what do you mean, what did I think?" It's probably the most beautiful property I ever saw. And he said, "Well, make him an offer." And I said, "Lou, I have $100,000. There's no way I can offer him that kind of money." He said, "I thought Jews were smart." He said, "Offer him the fucking $100,000. A week later, I got a call from Virginia Turpin. She said, "You better sit down. If you pay the brokerage fee of 10%, it's yours." He'll take $110,000. He wants somebody like you to have the property. That's another example of where I think somebody was looking after me. There was something above and beyond the money there for sure. Yeah, it's emotional to me when I think about it, because I loved that property so much, and my kids loved it. My daughter Stacy, she loved it more than anybody, I think.
I remember being at my father's house in Mendham, the most beautiful, magnificent home ever.
It was a place where we would go that was near our camp, so it held a lot of value. As a kid, it helped us really understand who our family was.
I think also just being able to all be together, like we had a couple family reunions along the way. It was really nice to be able to get to know like our cousin Chelsea, getting to know my Aunt Wendy, who lives in California.
I was there alone with him, and he was showing off on his horse he had in his backyard, and he ended up falling off the horse and broke his coccyx bone. And that was so scary. I will not go horseback riding.
I planted trees, I cut walking pathways to the pond, I created a sculpture garden, and I brought all the works of the artists that I represented from the Southwest and put it throughout the property. I essentially gutted, rebuilt, and added on to create a very special home for myself.
Grandpa had a few places in the tri-state area.
Yeah, one of my favorite memories when I was younger is going to my grandpa's lake house. I remember that one with all the different photos and memories we have there. It was just nice that we all were able to come together.
You know, this is
This
is your mom, and here's your mother and I. I met Nanette, Ben and Sam's mother, because I had put together a architectural group, and one of the fellows was dating Nanette, and I thought she was a really wonderful lady. And they broke up, and Nanette and I started to go out, and before we knew it, we were involved in a serious relationship, and Ben and Sam came into the picture.
We were all very close. Nanette, Faith, myself and Nanette. I think the world of Nanette. We were very close with the boys. And at the time, we would have large groups of people come to the house for Thanksgiving and Easter.
Nanette and I, when we split up, made a very clear agreement with one another that although we weren't married, we were going to remain as a team in bringing up the boys.
You know, people have these memories of their parents divorcing, and by and large, you hear pretty negative stories, experiences. And one thing I will say about both my parents is that they clearly committed early on to make that separation as positive, at least in our eyes, as it could be. So I have really no memories of them ever fighting. that to me showed a lot of growth growing up and having both your parents, while they're not together, but certainly present in your life is, extremely important. So I give them both a lot of credit because I can't imagine that was easy.
I mean, I've stayed very close to both Ben and Sam. I got them both internships when they were in college and got them both jobs at Cushman and Wakefield when they graduated college. And I give a lot of the success they've had to, their parents.
This was a little bit of Ben, a little bit of the renegade Sam.
Renegade.
Now look at this guy.
Yeah.
You tell me if that isn't. You're pretty cool. It was at that time that I started to look at myself, recognizing that I've been in all these marriages, had 4 children. I was still trying to figure out who I was. I wanted to try new businesses. I was trying to be somebody. It never really felt complete. I was consistently searching for some answers. Who was I? What the purpose of life was? Why am I here? I was on a search to find some real meaning for my existence.
When I met Bob, I think he was at this early point in his spiritual quest. He really wanted to be as good a person as he could possibly be in such a genuine way that there's no way you could be around Bob, I think, and not feel a tender connection to his soul because of his unwavering desire to be a better person.
And it was during that time that Bob started to, get in touch with himself internally on a consciousness level more. And it was probably 2 or 3 years later that he left the business entirely. I think he orchestrated a sale to another third party. That's when he moved to California and started searching for the more important things in life. Now, having said that, Bob is still Bob. He didn't totally lose his stripes, but he changed his focus and what was important to him, and it served him well.
How can you use who you are, whatever that capacity is, whether it's financial or whether it's time or whether it's loving or whatever it is, to share with another human being? All of the different relationships were part of that journey to come to a point where he recognized that service was the highest level of consciousness. When I became aware of the need, that's when I think Spirit started to bring me the people into my life that have been so significant and became my teachers and my guides to finding parts of myself that were suppressed, really suppressed as I was growing up. There was a great deal of confusion in the younger Robert, a young boy who was still trying to find out who he was.
He's a traveler. He's a traveler in consciousness and in body. We've gone on trips together. I mean, he came on one of my pilgrimages with me, and he's a traveler. And I want to say he's a connector. He's a connector, whether it's connecting you to something to help you grow or to connecting to other people, or it's about connecting people that he thinks might support one another, might lift one another. Yeah, I would say he's a traveler with a connecting mind.
As a friend, Bob is very loving, very caring, very supportive, and he tries to get to know himself better through the friendships, and he's completely open to hearing from people that he's close to, and he's prepared to give back the same thing in the other direction.
I feel like the two sides of Robert meet in what I call a generosity sphere. Now, he's not going to give you money, but he's going to help you make money. He's going to teach you how to fish and not give you his fish.
I felt like Bob was someone that was really living from his heart. He was one of the most caring and loving and thoughtful people, and that showed up in many different ways. The first way was through his kindness and seeing how he could assist me with my career.
He's going to say, have you thought about this? Have you looked at this? So that you start to open your own awareness, your own consciousness, and start to make decisions that allow you to flourish. All of that is laying in a spiritual foundation. And it's like, how do you bring more love to this lifetime as you are being successful?
In every town, in every state, families come and families go. Some people stay in the same place their whole life, while others move around in search of something new. But they all want something in common, a place to call home. The American dream is to own your own home, have a great job or business to support your family. But in challenging economic times, that dream is almost impossible. And if you have a disability, don't even think about it, unless you live in Bakersfield, California.
Howard's son found a 26-unit complex in Bakersfield, California. So we went partners, we raised the money. We each put up a significant amount ourselves.
I was around when Bob and Howard Lazar invested in these apartment buildings, and they were going to make a killing, supposedly, and all this stuff, and it did not.
Unfortunately, it was during 2007 that we started, and the real estate market started to crumble.
We listed the condominiums at a reasonable, we thought a reasonable price of $169,000, and we started marketing. We put ads in all of the local papers, and we had no takers.
Meanwhile, while Bob the developer was having problems selling the Taylor Street condominiums, there was an underrepresented, underserved, disabled community right here in Bakersfield.
Bob didn't want to give up on it.
He wanted to see it through to the end and wanted to see the situation resolved.
I needed to figure out a way that we could sell these units, and it looked almost impossible.
The project at this point was financially, it was basically a losing proposition at this point. We knew that there was no way that we were ever going to make any money. The question was, were we going to be able to break even?
They cut a deal with the city to help autistic kids and things like that.
We had a gentleman in that gave us a very good proposal for some special needs housing. We thought he did have a very good plan, and we did like the kind of programs that he offered and the clients that he was serving. So I introduced the two, and that was Dr. Clark from Kern Regional to Mr. Brenner, and just kind of took off from there.
As soon as I started to talk to him, I really, to be candid with you, my heart just started to open up. If we could possibly do something with Kern Regional Center, this would be, to me, the greatest blessing that I could ask for. It might be a financial loss, but it was it would have been the most meaningful thing to me. And I told him that, and he said, I'll never forget it. He said, Bob, let me tell you. He said, let's put our heads together. Maybe we can make this happen.
In past years, each state nationwide has routinely set aside housing specifically for low-income and disabled residents. But the Taylor Street project would be much more than just a Section 8 or government housing development. This project is an opportunity for disabled families to experience the challenges, happiness, and individual autonomy that comes along with property ownership.
They might have gotten like 25 cents to the dollar, but it didn't matter. I thought it was a heroic hit that they both took.
During the course of one's life, you meet so many people. Some you like, some you don't like, some you love. It's how communities are built. We tend to want to be around people we love. We may have our differences, whether they're political, religious, or physical. But there's one thing that we can all agree on. There's no place like home. No place like home.
I was dating a gal who was quite spiritual, and she wanted to introduce me to somebody by the name of Shamji Bhaktanar.
People call me Shyamji, and my aim in life is to be an example as well as learn from my students the art of living.
Very wise, and did chakra therapy. He had a very, very beautiful voice and lectures that we would listen to. So that really was the first time that I got exposed to something other than making money and something other than the way I was raised.
I work with breath. I work with sounds. There are probably 49 different sounds. We call them sounds of chakras.
And that started me recognizing that there was something bigger and more meaningful in life than what I was doing.
I saw that quality in Robert, that he was quite fit to become a good student.
And I started on, I think, a search to learn more about the unknown, learn more about the questions that I had always been asking and no one had any answers for.
Beyond all ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there.
That is true. All right?
My
Remember
beautiful
that.
father.
Beyond all right and wrong.
There is a field.
And I'll meet you there. USM was the beginning of a structure that gave me tools to start to see myself in a different way, to be able to access parts of myself that really were hidden growing up, that were protected growing up.
I said, Bobby, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'd like to take you somewhere and I'd like you to speak to somebody because I'm going to help you on your spiritual path. And I want to recommend a university to you where you might want to go. Bobby looked at me and said, I didn't really go to college, and this is a master's program you're suggesting. I said, don't worry about that. We'll figure all that out.
Heidi knew that I was a seeker and that there was something that she felt could be really meaningful to me. And she suggested that I go to University of Santa Monica and speak to this fella, Gavin Fry.
I had the privilege of meeting Robert in 1996. I was the director of admissions at the University of Santa Monica, and I had the pleasure of talking to everybody who was interested or was exploring participating in our master's degree program in spiritual psychology.
Meeting him for the first time, he was so clear on what USM stood for and what type of education I would get with this master's in spiritual psychology program. I remember just tears came down my eyes. He continued to be a best friend and counsel to me for many, many years thereafter.
As soon as he arrived and he sat across from me, there was a deep comfort that we both felt. And I could sense in Robert a depth and a sensitivity, most of all, and a yearning for a different life, a yearning for a different experience inside him. And so as we talked about the program and I He shared openly about challenges he was having living in New York, what his life currently was like, what he wanted. And I talked to him about how the program might be an ideal way to help him transition into a much, much richer life as guided by the soul. And I spoke freely about the soul. This spoke deeply to Robert. He began crying while we were talking, not because he was sad, it was joy. And he began to see that underneath layers of protection, past experiences of trauma, there was a heart and there was a jewel in his heart. And he was being gifted with the opportunity to be in touch with that jewel.
An hour later, Bobby came out and he said, I've been looking for this my whole life. I've signed up for a 2-year program.
USM saved my life and brought me to a whole different realm of understanding and loving of myself. There was no question in my mind that this was a path that was speaking to my soul, really speaking to my soul.
The majority of the characteristics that Bob has, and I say this lovingly, are the same as he's always had.
I have watched him grow and evolve over the decades. He's always been committed to being a better person for himself, for his family, for the community. Bobby has always been somebody who's been committed to that path.
Robert is about love and kindness. It's always about, how do I become more loving? How do I become more kind? How do I become more caring? And really willing to take responsibility for his character flaws. That, for me, is exciting. That's always the focus.
He acquired a language that he really resonated with, and I saw the changes start to come within him. And then he graduated, and then he said, Wendy, I really think that this would be wonderful for you. So in 1999, I signed up and then graduated in 2001. And I have to thank him, which I have multiple times, for introducing me to USM, because it's been pivotal in my life. And I've carried it through to my relationships, to professionally, personally. I use the skills every day.
The head of University of Santa Monica, Ron Holnick and Mary Holnick, both were initiates of John Roger, and actually started USM based on John Rogers' request for them to start a university. I didn't know very much about John Roger when I started at USM, but very shortly into the program, I found that there was such incredible logic and perspective in the studies that I wanted to find out where they really came from, where all of this manifested from.
After USM, it became clear that Robert was still seeking a more dedicated path. I had the honor and pleasure of introducing him to my teacher at the time, still is, John Roger. That in itself was pretty hysterical, the way that just kept evolving, unfolding. For Bob, who came from Jersey boy, which JR loved. First of all, he loved Bobby, but he loved the ruggedness, the realness of Bobby.
And at that point, I started to become a student of John Roger.
The movement of spiritual inner awareness, which is what John Rogers' first organization was, it was formed as a church, actually. It was a nonprofit organization in 1971. Then I think in 1975 or so, it became registered as a church. The University of Santa Monica was as a separate organization. The difference is that the movement of spiritual inner awareness was dedicated to the inner environment and basically was about the soul and the soul's journey inward through the realms of consciousness, riding the sound current of God.
Under MSIA, we do baptisms, much different than regular baptisms through different religions. This is clearing if you're into esoteric things, it clears the the judgments and negativity of other life and this life.
Jesus Garcia, Zeus baptized me.
Our thing is love, and Bob's got it.
This is a letter to my beloved, which is really to myself, but it was also to JR. It was his birthday, and I wanted to write something to him, but in a sense, I was writing to my alignment with JR, which was the two of us. In 1994, I was scared to death, literally. I just got divorced from my third wife, had 4 children, had acquired a substantial amount of assets, and yet was so empty and alone that I considered the possibility of leaving this world. I was seeking desperately for love, someone to love me, someone for me to love back, someone who, no matter what, would be there for me, would answer all my questions, teach me the meaningful things of life, talk to me when I was scared and lonely. I was seeking the unconditional loving for myself, ourself. I was judgmental of everything and everyone. I knew that person would have to be so unquestionably, undeniably genuine and pure as to character, integrity, wisdom, and loving. This would be the only way for me to trust. In 1996, I was introduced to John Roger, who became that person I was seeking, my spiritual teacher, guide, and beloved. Included with JR was MSIA, which became my support community. It is 2009 now, 13 years later. I am still learning how to accept the love of self unconditionally, but the light is getting brighter, and I am experiencing with more consistency and depth my trusting of God as my partner and the divinity that lives within me. I'm in the deepest of gratitude to you, John Roger, and to the sense that this peace, awareness, and consciousness is nearer for me than it has ever been before. Happy birthday and God bless you, my beloved JR. Robert S. Brenner, September 24th, 2009. That was when I was really asking for the highest good. Could I be partners with God? That's my beloved. The beloved is within myself. One of the things that I continue to have as the most significant learning is the issues that will come up always in relationship. And what is so clear to me is that, and this is JR, the issue isn't the issue. That is not what it's about. It's about my attitude towards the issue. What I would like to say about marriage and family is they're very, very significant in terms of molding who I am. I'm very blessed to have the children that I have. And it sounds funny, but every wife I had, they were special. Freedom to Choose started from the University of Santa Monica. A inmate named Rhonda, she wrote to the University of Santa Monica asking if we could supply any type of support for prisoners.
My name is Rhonda Leland. I'm serving almost 2 life sentences. I'm not eligible for the board until 2036.
This workshop started because Rhonda had the courage to write to the president of the university and say, could you please come and give a talk? We could really benefit from that. And in their communication over time, the idea developed to have a whole workshop. And so we're actually here because Rhonda took the initiative. She had the courage to take a risk and to write that letter. So thank you.
We put together a group to go in there and counsel the prisoners.
And as it turned out, what a surprise, women in prison are just as human and divine as people who are not in prison. It seems as though whether one is in prison or not makes very little difference.
Freedom to Choose is based on the work of Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who was imprisoned during World War II in a concentration camp.
Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist living in Germany just before World War II started. The secret police came to his house and he was taken to a concentration camp. And when he got there, he noticed that everything can be taken from a person except one essential freedom. There's one freedom that can never be taken from anybody, and that's the freedom to choose one's attitude, regardless of circumstances.
That freedom to choose is within each of us. Without forgiveness, life is governed by an endless cycle of resentment and retaliation. You need forgiveness to really get to your loving. We would work with these women who had never had an opportunity to really open up themselves and share who they were without judgment in a really secure, safe environment. And this is almost unheard of in a prison of this nature.
I'm so thankful that you made me cry because I was really, really getting worried that, I just wasn't even a person anymore.
This was an opportunity really to be working with these women by sharing my heart.
USM is a wonderful place, and I've learned an awful lot there. But I'm telling you the truth, being here for 3 days is deeper, more healing, and more special to me than anything that I've ever done.
Shine your light, 'cause you're beautiful when you shine.
Robert is dedicated to helping others. Going to the prison and spending the time with the inmates there, he would put in hours and hours, weekends upon weekends of putting his life on hold and spending the time at the women's prison. Going into a place like that, I thought, wow, how does he do it? It's a little bit frightening, to be working and counseling people who are in dark, dark places. Robert's not afraid of those dark places. He's not. That is an inspiration.
In retrospect, I think when I go back as to the first thing that I ever did when I came to California is I noticed that there were a lot of homeless in Santa Monica where I was spending time. Often I would stop by and talk to the homeless and listen to their stories. And I found it was fascinating, the wisdom that many of these people had. They had no food. They went to the food shelters, but I got the idea that maybe one of the things that I could do for service, to make a difference for them, was make sandwiches for them. I would lay out the bread, make 50 or 60 sandwiches and cheese, fill up my igloos, and I would carry them to one park where most of these homeless would be. And I would go from one group to the next group and talk to them and then give them sandwiches. And I became the turkey man. Everybody used to, when I would pull up, they say, "Oh, there's the turkey guy."
He is somebody who has a huge heart. He has so much love to give, whether it's for his family or a stranger on the street. He's constantly showing his love for others and wanting to lift people up.
I think that was my first experience with doing service and finding how that really was more meaningful to me, I think, than possibly to them. It was just so special to be able to be giving back in my little way something to people that were in need.
I don't even know how many acts of kindness Uncle Bobby has done
because it's not something he brags about. Like, oh, look, I did this, I did this, I did this. Like the sandwiches thing. He's not going around telling everybody that he's making sandwiches and doing all this. He's doing it out of his heart. And that's what's so beautiful about Uncle Bobby is his heart.
A phrase that he's always said to us that has stuck with me is that the greatest gift that you can give yourself is being in service of others.
For Thanksgiving, we would go to New York, and he'd always take the leftovers. And when we'd get in the city, he'd make us go hand out leftovers to the homeless. And it wasn't anything that was structured. It wasn't anything that's like, you're getting points for. It was just something that was important to him, which was really neat because then it became important to us. And it was something about Thanksgiving that we would do each year. And I thought that was pretty neat.
Sammy was one of the inmates I met at Chochilla. At 16, he was put in for life for shooting a grocery store owner. He was trying to steal tape. His father was a police officer, and he had taken his gun, and this fella tried to stop him, and Sammy shot him and got arrested and was in prison till he was 45 years old. Sammy had been incarcerated for so long, since 16. He didn't know how to drive a car, and he needed a license, and everything that we take for common, he didn't have any experience with.
And that's the kind of thing Bob does. He went in blindly. He didn't know about the program of teaching people to drive, but whatever it was that was necessary, he was very happy to get involved.
So that was a very, very touching experience because he just couldn't believe that he now could drive a car. Providence Trinity is the hospice program that I've been working with for the past 20 years. I recognized that I had a calling to work with individuals that were passing. They were going to transition. I just felt like there was something special about being with someone that was moving on in life.
If I asked you what the purpose of you staying in this human existence, you've been here 94 years.
Well,
Why are you here?
I'm supposed to teach somebody something.
How did it feel when I met you again in the rehabilitation a couple years ago?
I just felt like I knew you.
Yeah.
I didn't even know the I didn't even need to be introduced.
You didn't have to be introduced.
No.
I felt the same way. I knew. I just loved you.
Yeah, right.
There were no judgments. There were no expectations. It was just an honest, open type of connection.
While in hospice, we can't cure patients, we can help the patients and their families heal. And Robert has a very special gift when he's around patients and their loved ones. His warmth and his compassion really come through. This work is drawn to him, and I really believe he's drawn to this work.
One particular person, Ruth Farber, that I worked with, that I would take every week to Trader Joe's. She would inspect all of the fruit and the vegetables and pick out the perfect one. And I would just get such an incredible warmth by being with her. She was very wise as well. She had a understanding of life that most people that I had known didn't really have. It was fascinating, the wisdom that so many people have when they're passing, because they're open to really sharing the most significant parts of their life. And it was just beautiful.
One of the main levels of support that Robert provides is the Legacy Art Project.
And what that was a program for children, young children that were passing and their families. I would bring 18 different watercolors. I would go to the child. If it was a for example, a young baby, I would just take his little foot and I would put a color on his little feet or on his little hand, and I would press it down on the paper, and that would be the beginning of the painting. From there, the parents would do the same thing. They would pick a color and they would put it next to his little foot or his hand. And then the uncles and the aunts and then the cousins. After everybody did their hands with the watercolor, they would then write a message. By doing it in this way, they created something very beautiful for the family once the child had passed. And this ultimately would be something that they would keep forever. And it would be a remembrance of how beautiful this child was and how much it meant to them to be part of their life. Some of the letters here that are in here were letters of love that I wanted to share. I didn't send it, but I wrote it to all of you, letting you know how much I adored all of you and that how important you were in my life.
It is a beautiful day right along the track here at Churchill Downs for Derby 150, and we caught up with a family from New York who we saw last year, and every year they come to the Derby. It's a father and two sons from New York, and they try to outdo themselves from the year before. They are hard to miss.
There's something about having your two boys with you. Legacy. And each year, you know, I'm getting a little older, and it's a little tougher to make the trip. But it's something that really fills my heart. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to be able to be with them and share an experience year after year, and God willing, I'll just be able to do this for a long time.
I think it was Dad's idea to match.
Oh,
No.
definitely.
Definitely.
Maybe like 5 years ago, we started going. It was a dream he had never been. And
that's right.
So it was an opportunity for us to go do something together and pair it with horse racing, something that he loves, and also gambling, another thing that he loves.
Derby time.
It's been a great tradition that we've had going on 5 years, and the outfits just have taken it to another level. And now, you know, with the seats that we have, they happen to be right in front of like all the national TV cameras. So we're constantly getting some attention for them, which has been fun.
What are you looking forward to today?
I'm looking forward to just having a good time, hanging out with my father and brother, and, you know, creating memories. It's our third year, so, you know, hopefully we can have more. We just want to have a bunch of new memories like this.
I would like generations from now to know that lead with love. Loving is what it's all about. And it's work to be in acceptance with people no matter what they say.
The dad that I know is someone who's constantly searching. The path of going through that every day and every year is really one of the reasons that he's kept so much vitality and been so young, because he's just constantly exposing himself to new experiences, new things, new ways of living. It reminds me that, like, just because I'm doing something now doesn't mean that I have to be doing that forever or next month. You can consistently reinvent yourself and try new things and fail and try something else. And he's done a really good job with that in his life.
It's been a life's journey to try to understand what would trigger me as a young boy and how I might respond in a different way. I'm not there even at this age, but it's a work in progress.
When he leaves the earth, you could definitely say that he's left this place a lot better than he came into it as.
What can I say? I'm very proud of all four of them. They're all very different, and then they're all very much the same in the loving and the kindness that's within all four of them. They all carry a very special thread. Each one of my children are unique.
2, 3, 4.
It just gets me choked up. It's just our family has really grown, and it's so cool. It's so cool, and with Dad keeping us all together, it's I'm just so much in gratitude.
Well, I'm pretty blessed to have grandchildren that are children of parents that are loving and caring and unconditionally love them. Every one of my grandchildren have been nurtured and loved.
When he truly loves somebody, like people in his family, he really does want to do anything he can to have them love him back.
I can't say I've ever seen parents so attentive as my children are to their children. It's a blessing, and it makes me proud.
So this was Wendy and Chelsea.
That's cute. Your first grandkid.
Yeah, first grandchild. Soon to be a neurosurgeon. And here's Jake.
Every one of these kids are unique. Each one has very special talents, and each one I know will grow up to carry the characteristics of their parents.
Well, he's a very good example. He has lived life rather fully, and he's an inspiration for people, especially for his children, grandchildren, maybe great-grandchildren. And as a friend, also, I find him to be very loyal. He has a very good and a very compassionate side, which I like very much.
Che non ho mai veduto e vissuto con te, adesso sì li vivrò con te, partirò su navi per mari che io lo so, no, no, non esistono più, con te io li vivrò, con te partirò, paesi che non ho mai veduto e vissuto con te, adesso sì li vivrò con te, partirò su navi per mari che io lo so, no, no, non esistono più, con te io li rivivrò, con te partirò.
You know, in awakening the heart energies, you can't help but discover your own self-worth, your own self-love, and your own magnificence. We really don't have the expression of outer loving until our inner loving is there. I've lived an enriching life. I've accumulated a group of lifelong friends that, along with my family, are really at the heart of my being. And over the course of time, have been involved with a variety of activities that took me into some exciting and some very challenging places. No place has been more amazing than where I went inside of myself, opening up my heart, exploring my psyche and my spiritual nature. I hope this film creates some insight into the story of my life.
I also think that people should know that he's just a really special person that cares about all of the people in his life, whether he's just met you or, you know, you've been in his life for a long time. I feel like he's a great relational and caring person.
What'd you like about your grandpa?
Playing with him.
What else?
Lucy.
He's always joking around. Sometimes you are trying to talk about something serious and he comes like with the most funny comment.
Willing to do anything for his children. And he always included me.
He's definitely a very good businessman. He's very entrepreneurial, very into art, very spiritual.
My father, in my eyes, felt like a famous businessman, a risk taker to the extreme, because I'm not a big risk taker or wasn't then. So it was fascinating to see him thrive and hustle and bustle and sell and could sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. A lot of the world bad mouths people. And he doesn't do that. And I noticed that, and I love that about him.
And Robert walks into the room, and the room fills with energy and light and goodness.
He really shows up in ways that are very vulnerable and open.
The way he related to people, which was really extraordinary. I found those qualities to be really, they are like spiritual qualities. He was not a victim of his conditioning. He was always interested to go beyond conditioning. And for several years, many years, I was his teacher, so to speak. Little did he know that I was learning more from him than he learned from me.
Every one of us is special. And Uncle Bobby instills that belief, right? That we are all unique and special. We are all our own snowflake.
Having a interest in the gambling aspect of life, the action, the risk taking, and being in service were not exclusive from one another. I always felt that no matter what, that there was a reason for me being on this earth, and it wasn't really selling furniture or making a bet on a football game. It was really being in service, and it was how can you make a difference in the world? How can you be meaningful to another human being?